Cisco email security, data loss protection. So we're going to look at DLP, leveraging Cisco's email security appliance, whether that's cloud or on-prem. There's lots of stuff that this product can do from an email perspective, and I'll go through each one. Again, these will be pointed videos. You want to do something, we'll walk through the configuration, show you, test it, validate that it works, and we'll move on. As we go along, I might come back or circle back and do just kind of a big overview of Cisco email security. But first, I thought I want to empower folks very quickly to be able to leverage the platform. All right, so like anything, what the first thing we want to do is come in and do some pre-testing, right? We want to see what does it look like before we make the change. So here we've got Alan, which is an internal user, and then you have Adam, which is an external user. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create an email, and that email is going to have some data in it, and that data is going to be things that we don't want necessarily to leave the organization. And there's a couple of ways of doing this, right? In this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to send email, we're going to attach the file that we don't want to leave the organization, then we're going to build policy to prevent that mechanism from happening. You can build it, you can take it much further than that to say, okay, if it is sensitive data, I'll send it outbound, but maybe I want to encrypt that data, right? Based on what that data is itself. We're not going to do that in this scenario. I may add that in later videos. All right, so we'll quickly give it a name. We'll go search for the file that we want to send. And this information in this file's got social security numbers, or in Canada, it'd be social insurance numbers, right? But we're going to use the US term, social security numbers. We'll go through, we'll find that file, we'll attach it, and then we'll send it outbound. And what's going to happen is that file is going to be successfully sent, right? There's nothing in place right now in regards to enforcing policy in regards to data loss prevention or protection. All right, there's the file. It's attached. You can put something in the body of the email. So we'll do that just to make it look as real as possible, I guess, even though this is just a test environment. And what we're going to do is once we do this, there's going to be a incoming policy or mail policy and an outgoing mail policy. In this case, this is an internal user going to submit or send email outbound. So we're going to build out what we call as a content filter, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Once we build that outbound, because there's outbound and inbound content filter, once we build that, what we're going to do is assign it to the outbound mail policy. And it's pretty simple. If I didn't add all of this testing, it's honestly 5 to 7 minute configuration. All right, we're going to send, and we just want to look at the results, right? So check the inbox of the outside email recipient. We can see that they've successfully received an email. And you can see there's the attachment in the email that we just sent. So they're successfully able to send personal identifiable information externally to some entity, whether that be a business partner or whether that be in regards to maybe malicious intent, right? I'm going to share intellectual property or personal identifiable information, credit card information, etc. Most times it's probably being done by accident, right? So let's log in. This is the Cisco email security platform. This is the interface to manage the platform. Now there is a centralized administrative platform as well. So if you have multiple email security appliances, you can have what we call as a SMA, but really what that is a management platform to simplify some of the things that take place. You can cluster the appliances, etc., right? There's a lot of things that you can do to simplify some of those larger deployments. So first thing we're going to do is create a text resource. So let's go in here and add text resource, and you'll get to see what this is in a minute. We'll give it a name. Call this DLP notify. And what this is going to be is a DLP notification template. And then we'll put a brief message here. You have sent an email that is inconsistent with policy, or whatever else that you might want to include here, right? You're violating corporate policy, this, you know, etc., right? Wouldn't be a bad idea to have your lawyers, if you have lawyers within the organization, form up something and have it inserted here as well. It's never a bad idea. All right, once we create this, we submit it. Now we're going to use this is like an object, right? So we create that object and we're going to use it elsewhere as we build policy or other elements that we will add to policy. So let's create another one called DLP disclaimer. And this one's going to be something like, so it's going to be a disclaimer template, but it's going to say this email may contain confidential or privileged material for the sole use of the intended recipient only, right? Again, you can have legal teams look at this and validate how best to word this for your organization or country, state, province, etc. Now, here you can see there's a spelling mistake, nicely underlined, right? That you can go back and fix that mistake before saving or submitting or committing any changes. So right now, again, this is an object, right? For a lack of a better term. When I submit this, it's actually still not in use, right? But it is available to use. So hit submit here. And once that's done, and I'm going to do this regularly throughout all videos, is as you start building out these policies, nothing is saved. Even though you hit submit, or what appears to be saved, if you don't commit the changes, they're actually not written. So if you rebooted the box, those changes would be lost. So here we want to commit change. And obviously a good practice here would be is add a comment. So if someone else is reviewing or auditing, they're going to see what changes that you actually made. All right, so we gave it a name here. All right, so let's move to the next step. So we're going to go to monitor, policy, virus, and outbreak quarantines, and we're going to add a new quarantine, and we're going to call this policy quarantine. Or we're going to add a policy quarantine, sorry, and then we're going to name it something like DLP violations, right? So this is going to allow us to move it into something that's meaningful to us. And then we can also set the retention period and what the default action might be. So in this case, what we're going to do is we'll create a DLP violation. We'll hold this for 7 days. And after 7 days, maybe we'll release it. Now, again, this is all going to be dependent on your internal policy. Right? And you can see there's some additional settings that we could leverage as well. But to showcase the capability, it's as simple as that. We submit. Again, nothing happens until you commit changes. And again, this isn't in play. We're not using this quarantine at this particular time. So we'll commit changes. Again, we'll do this in stages as we move along. You don't have to commit these changes every single change that you make, right? I'm doing it because I create an element. I'm going to save that or submit or save, right, depending on the interface. and I'm going to commit, and I'm going to write out a comment in regards to what element that I've made changes to the system. Now, again, you could have went in here and built it all from start to finish and did commit, and all of those changes would be committed, and you could put something as simple as DLP configuration completed, right? Without any additional details. All right, so we have created the text resource. We've created the policy, virus, and outbreak quarantine for our specific use case for DLP violations with 7-day retention. Now let's go through and do some customizations in regards to DLP policy. So let this render here. All right, so we'll go in and we'll create a message action. We'll give this a name. We'll call it medium violation. I was a little too quick here with typing. You can give it a description, right? Obviously, the more detail that you include here, the better for other folks that might be viewing your configuration. In this case, message action is going to be quarantine. And then if we go to advanced, you can see there's a whole bunch of settings here that's available to us. We're going to start leveraging some of the elements that we've used. So policy quarantine, this is now where we're going to use that policy quarantine that we just created called DLP violations. Modify message subject. In this case, we're just going to use the variable subject. Add disclaimer text. In this case, we'll create that DLP disclaimer. Again, now that we've used that policy quarantine that we've created, and now we're using one of those text resources that we created. And here you could say below or above the message body itself. You can see there's a bunch of other options here, a message delivery, DLP notification. And what we could do is DLP notification, we could actually come in and say include original message as an attachment itself too. So maybe we'll say the recipient, the sender itself, right? The one that sent the message is actually going to get this message back with the disclaimer on it, right? And we're going to include the original message as an attachment. So they actually have the full email that's an attachment that's sent back to them. And we'll do the DLP notify. So now we've used the 3 elements that we just created previous to this step, right? The 2 text resources, right? DLP disclaimer and DLP notify. And we also use the policy quarantine DLP violation that we created. So that's pretty much it. I mean, you can come in here and preview the message if you wanted to. We're gonna actually send an email out, so we're gonna get the full experience here. So we submit, and again, nothing happens right until you commit those changes. So commit those changes. Give it something meaningful. And I'm doing all of this through RDP, so sometimes the screen, the rendering is a little bit choppy. I'm actually in a remote location, and I'm using satellite for internet, so it's a little bit, it's got some latency here and there, but I think it's still effective in regards to showcasing how to get this built out. All right, so now we've got this customized DLP policy, right? Or action, right? Itself. So now let's go into DLP Policy Manager. And this is where we're going to add a DLP policy. And there's a lot of different pre-canned policies here. Right? So you can see when I drop down one of these, there's a tremendous amount of options available to anyone. But we'll focus on the larger market, right? The US, and you can see, look at all the options: credit card numbers, access numbers, etc. Right? And you can see here social insurance numbers for Canada. You can see, other countries, UK. Here we're going to do social security numbers for US. And you can see this is already pre-canned and created, right? So we can come in here, we can modify this if we wanted to. There's really not much. Maybe we'll change the severity to medium, to a medium violation. So the medium severity incident will change to medium violation. And then we'll submit this. And again, like all the other changes, nothing happens till you commit. And now we've got this ready to go, right? And it didn't take that long, right? We're 60 minutes in, but we've also went in and we did some pre-testing at the beginning, right? I'm walking through and explaining things in a little more detail than one would when they're going through and building the configuration. So, making this change, once you know what you're trying to achieve, making this change is fairly quick. And you could build it in a sense that you build this all out and then you have a test policy above the policy that you want to do this in larger scale, and you can actually do a bunch of testing without impacting any other user or small test case, for example. So in this case, we're going to go to outgoing mail policies. And we're going to enable DLP. Now, for some reason, I think I mentioned we're going to create content filter at the beginning. Disregard that. I was thinking something else. Obviously, this is a DLP function on outbound. There is no content filter required. The next video, though, and subsequent videos after, you're going to see a lot more in regards to content filter. So now on the outgoing mail policy, we've enabled that DLP policy for social or security numbers, right? So again, nothing happens. Now nothing happens when we hit submit, but when we hit commit changes, obviously this is going to be live. So if your users are actually sending mail at this point in time, DLP policy will be a check that's in play, right? For outgoing emails. All right, so I think the next step would be let's connect to the console, because I want to show you different views of looking at the data, right? And again, subsequent videos will do other things as well, so you can kind of get a good idea of what to look for in some of the messaging logs or the interface itself. So maybe the first thing we'll do before we send an email is we'll jump on the console of the email security appliance, and we're going to tail the mail log. So we'll see whatever's happening. And obviously, if you have production data going through here, it can get a little bit noisy, right? And you may want to filter beyond that. But in my case, this is test environment. The only mail that's going to be sent is the mail that I send. So it's going to be easy and nice and clean for us to view the data. So now that that's set, we're going to be able to see that log once we create the email. So we're going to pretty much do what we did at the very, very beginning. So we'll create that email. So remember, this is an internal user. I'm going to send mail outbound. So Alan internal is going to send it to Adam external. Give it a subject, right? Again, you don't have to do any of this for testing, but I like to include a little bit of detail in regards to what it might look like, right? Because if we modify the subject line, if we modify the body with other text in it, you get a good sense of what's actually taking place. All right, we'll attach that file again. And I could have just grabbed it there, but I'm going to browse to it. Okay, and then all we have to do is send. Now that that's done, we could probably go over to, there's a couple things we can send and receive to see the message here. Right? Or we could have just jumped to the email security appliance. That should already be showing data there as we sent it. So here's a little bit that we want to focus on, right? So this kind of walks through the whole mail flow itself, right? So it'll do, certain checks, right, as it's going either inbound or outbound. What we're really looking for is specific to what we're trying to achieve here, and that's around DLP. So you can see there, DLP violation, severity medium, right? It gives a risk factor, DLP policy match, social security numbers, right? Okay, so that's good. So it hit, we know that it hit and it matched. So what took place after that, right? So we can continue to look through the log itself and scroll down, but what we should see here is that it was sent to quarantine, and the quarantine that it was sent to was DLP violations, right? So that's that quarantine that we created earlier on in the pre-steps before we actually started to assign anything to policy itself. All right, so that worked exactly how we were expecting the result itself, right? We said if you did send something that matches that, I want to send it to quarantine and hold that for 7 days, not 17 days, but you could have did 17. But if we go back into Alan's inbox, you can see now you have sent an email that has been inconsistent with corporate policies, right, and acceptable use. And then you can click on that email itself and have a quick view of the original message that was sent. So this is just a reminder to the individual, okay, if you're not sure what email that it was, this is the email that you sent, right? And this is the attachment. So now the sender could make a decision, right? And rectify the situation, meaning not to actually send that email or release it. The administrator could also, or maybe even somebody from audit or DLP or whatever, risk management, could come in and make a decision to release it if they had the credentials to log in. Or we can certainly do that. But if you look here, what we'll do is let's look at DLP incidents. So there's a ton of dashboards and you can, make them PDF, printable PDF if you want to, but you can see there's that medium violation, right? Social security numbers. And if I want to, I can pivot right into message tracking itself. So, and this is really cool because when you have a violation and you're looking at the dashboards, I can very quickly come in and click on that violation. So you see there's one here. It's actually going to fill in all the details that require me to filter for that specific message. So you can see there's a ton of things that I can search on with Cisco's message tracking capabilities. So here very quickly, we're looking for DLP violations and we're looking for social security numbers. And that's the policy that we're looking for. And if we scroll down, we can see here's that message, right? And if we click on show details, it's going to be very similar to what we saw in that log file, right? When we were tailing mail_logs, it provided us kind of a message flow, right? Or a mail flow of what actually took place. Well, that's the same here as well, but through the GUI. So you can see receive time, message ID, message size, subject, envelope sender, envelope recipient. yada, 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 right? Lots of good data there. But really what I want to do is continue to scroll down and make sure that I can see why this might have been sent or held in quarantine or maybe dropped, right, for some policies. In our case, we know exactly what it should have done, and it should have sent it to quarantine, right? So if we look at the message logs or the flow log or message tracking, we could see here DLP violation, and we can see as we scroll down, oh, went too far here. But you can see where it hit those violations. Now DLP match data, it's going to actually show us what data was matched. So you can see this was the content that was held within the actual file itself. So pretty easy, right? We were able to very quickly configure policy, control data that might be sent outbound that matches social security numbers. We're able to very quickly see the logging that's very detailed that provides us insight of what took place when there was a match. Message tracking allowed us to very quickly go in and analyze messages. If you have thousands or hundreds, you can see how granular one can be. Now what we'll do is go to policy, virus, and outbreak quarantines, and then go to the policy violation, right, DLP violation itself, and release that mail and have a look at what happens at that point in time. So say we've determined that it's okay, right? This mail could go outbound. And again, if this had information like social security numbers or insurance numbers, credit card information, personal identifiable information, etc., right? It goes on and on and on. And you were going to send it outbound, you probably want to have an encryption policy added to this as well. So not only, DLP validate the actual data being sent, but then encrypt it if it matches to ensure that nobody sniffing the environment can actually see it. So here we're going to release it, and then we're going to see the results on the recipient itself. So we'll go back to the inbox. We'll do a send and receive. And this is pretty much the end, right? We know that the policy is working, but what we want to do is see, did any changes happen to the mail once it was released? All right, so we see a delivery to Adam. Remember, Adam is external to the organization. And we can see there's that second message. And you can see at the bottom there, this email may contain confidential privileged material for the sole use of the intended recipient only. Bang, right? There's that text resource, right? The disclaimer being added on there. And again, very simple, but you would encrypt. DLP with Cisco email security, easy peasy.